All right, we're ready when you guys are. You're on? We're live? Okay. Good evening. I'd like to call the Township of Fairfield's Board of Adjustment meeting for August 20th, 2024 into session. This is our regular meeting. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Steve, can we have roll call, please?
Mr. Moriano, Mr. Honorata.
Here.
Mr. Metallo.
Here.
Mr. Baskinger.
Here.
Mr. Travato.
Here.
Mr. Carmagnola.
Here.
Mr. Iania.
Here.
Mr. Ivarone.
Here.
Mr. Fiatarolo.
Here.
Chairman Lapari.
Here. Also in attendance tonight is our board attorney, Lou Rago, our township engineer and board secretary, Steve Burry, our Burge Associates planner representative, John Zabo, and our transcriber, Margot Biblin. Our next regularly scheduled meeting is September 17th, 2024. Let it be stated that adequate notice for the time and date for this meeting was posted on the bulletin board in the municipal building and delivered to the Star Ledger and the Progress, and that no case will be allowed to start its presentation after 11 p.m. First order of business is approval of the minutes from the July 16th, 2024 regular meeting. Do I have a motion?
Make a motion.
Mr. Ianni, a second?
I'll second.
Mr. Ivarone, roll call, please.
Mr. Metallo.
Yes.
Mr. Travato.
I wasn't here.
You're not here for this, okay. Mr. Carmagnola.
Yes.
Mr. Iania.
Yes.
Mr. Ivarone.
Yeah.
Mr. Fiatarolo.
Wasn't
Chairman Lapari.
Yes. Memorialization of resolutions, application 2023-6, Route 46 East, LLC, 460 Route 46 East, Block 3802, Lot 22.01. They requested C variances and the site plan. Counselor, John, are we okay?
Yes.
Yeah, that's good. Okay. I'd like to make I'd like to hear a motion to approve that resolution.
Make a motion.
Mr. Ianni, a second. Mr. Carmagnola, thank you.
Mr. Honorata.
Yes.
Mr. Metallo.
Yes.
Mr. Baskinger.
Yes.
Mr. Carmagnola.
Yes.
Mr. Iania.
Yes.
Chairman Lapari.
Yes. Okay, the new and old business, we're going to switch it up a little bit tonight just for the, spoke to council for Danny Sirica. We have a couple that'll have to recuse themselves for that, but they are here for West Essex. So our first order of business tonight is application 2024-3 West Essex FC, 16 Passaic Ave, block 19078, lot 1, requesting C and D variances. Esteemed counselor, how are you tonight?
Good evening, Mr. Chairman. Council's name is Robert Gassione. The firm is Gassione Pomaco.
Steve, we're going to notice publication.
Yes, we are.
All yours.
Proceed.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, as I said, the firm is Gassione Pomaco, 1 Bowling Drive in West Orange. Represent West Essex FC, the applicant, prospective tenant at the property at 16 Unit 3. My client is requesting preliminary and final major site plan approval with, in addition to a use and bulk variance relief. We have 5,000 square feet of the building for indoor recreation use. The building at the site is approximately 45,000 square feet of commercial space. The proposal meets the parking requirements of the township, which is 1 parking space per 1,000 square feet of gross floor area for warehouse use and 1 parking space per 250 square feet for indoor recreation. The witnesses you'll hear from tonight are C.J. DeMarco of the West Essex Club that provides the training for the children, and John McDonough, the professional planner. Mr. McDonough will discuss the proofs and explain why he thinks the application meets the criteria necessary for the board to approve this application. I'd like to call my first witness, C.J. DeMarco.
When you're ready, Mr. DeMarco, if you could raise your right hand. With regard to this application, do you swear the testimony you're about to give shall be the truth?
I do.
You state your name and spell your last name, please, for the record.
My name is Christopher DeMarco. It's DeMarco.
Thank you.
Mr. DeMarco, what's your home address?
14 Evergreen Place in Roseland.
Your occupation?
Insurance sales.
Are you the former president of West Essex Soccer Club?
I am, yes. I'm now the president.
Is the West Essex Soccer Club a non-profit entity?
Yes, we're a 501c3.
What is the address of the property involved in tonight's application?
16 Passaic Avenue, Fairfield, Unit 3.
And what is the club looking to do at this location?
The club's looking to put some turf in order to use the facility for supplemental training for our membership.
And how much space are you leasing?
It's 5,000 total square feet, which about 3,900 of it is playable.
And what's the term of the lease?
It's a 5-year with a renewable option.
And why is this space needed?
It's the need. We're taking our kids inside. We're playing on a lot of hardwood floor. The growth of recreational soccer, while a great thing, also hinders our ability to get space. So we're very happy with the growth of that for the rec programs. And we service the sending districts of West Essex. So what we're doing is bringing the kids from the 4 districts together, keeping them together, and just trying to grow a program, give them the best advantage possible.
What work do you have to do on this property to make it useful?
Just lay the turf, and there were 2 offices that were freestanding that needed to be removed.
If this application is approved, will you still have other training of an outside nature?
Yes, we have relationships with all 4 of the towns. It would be supplemental mostly, and then rainy days.
What are your expected hours of use at this location should this application be approved?
After school would be probably 4:30 to 9:30 at the latest with our older kids.
And the total number of children that would at one time or another use this location?
Our max roster size is 18, so you'd have 18, maybe 1 or 2 coaches, tops.
But that's at the same time. What's the total number of children?
We currently serve 180 active players. We've got 40 in our pre-academy, which is our kindergarten, and then 25 in our same kindergarten session.
But the maximum at any one time would be 16 to 18, one team, is that correct?
Yes.
And how many teams are involved in this?
We currently have 15 teams across 2 leagues.
And how many coaches do you have?
We have 6 paid professional trainers.
And do they coach more than one team?
They do, yeah. Most of our trainers have 2 or 3 teams.
Are there any other uses in existence at this property besides the 5,000 square feet you want to use?
There's a Parisi Speed School next door, and then the rest are commercial, which are done by, I went there today, it was empty on my way over here.
And are they mainly uses that occupy the space during the day?
Yes.
And what, if you know, is the total number of parking spaces for this property at 16%?
There's 50 on our front door and probably 50 to our back.
And does when you say the front door, in other words, when you enter, you go up the right side, the front door
Correct.
is not actually facing the street, it's facing the side.
Yes, facing the woods.
And does the landlord own an adjacent piece of property?
They do.
Is there any easement in existence between the 2 pieces?
There is not.
And did you discuss this issue with the landlord?
Yes, they had said that they would address that if the building was to be sold. It would be a condition of the sale because nobody would buy it without the easement rights.
And last question, you're not expanding this 5,000 square feet in any way. You're renting that particular space. No further questions, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, take questions for the applicant from the board. Chris, a couple from me. Driving over there, you have access points both front and back door.
Yes.
Okay, the back door is where a lot of the loading docks are, and there's that moving company right across the building. The front, when I was there, like you said today, you stated, I was there at 3:30 in the afternoon on a business day, and of the 40 or 50 spots in the front of the building, 11 were being used. So parking seems to be good. Parisi's, I had a great idea. They have a sign on the back door that says, employees only entrance, to try to keep, I guess, parents and children from parking in the back and going in the back door.
Correct.
Could that be a condition of approval that you would do that? And of course, you can't, shepherd everybody from doing it, but I think that would kill the majority of people wanting to park in the back and going in the back door.
That's gonna be, our only plan is to enter the front.
Right.
We'll have staff parking in the back.
And we have no objection to that being a
None at all.
condition, should the board approve this and see fit to make that a condition.
Okay. You obviously, 5,000 square feet, you can't play any games there.
Correct.
So there'll never be two teams playing each other, is that
Correct.
correct? And would you, the condition of approval, would you be comfortable with 7 days a week from 4:30 or even earlier to 9:30 at night? Would you want to push that envelope to 10:30 for some of the older kids? What would you anticipate your hours of operation to be?
My only concern with I don't know what the summer hours respectfully would look like. But I don't see a problem with, our kids aren't out of school till 4:30 anyway. The 10:30, we'd be comfortable with whatever you're comfortable with. I think we've got enough to squeeze the 9:30, the 10:30 would be great.
Yeah.
Our parents will kill us if they're on any later than that, they have homework and stuff.
But a lot of both the physical training and the sports-specific training, baseball and soccer that I've seen, some of the older kids you can get at 9:30 to 10:30. And like Counselor said, you're gonna have the majority of those people that work in those units are out of there
Yeah.
by dinner time, so.
That was a concern of ours when we looked at the space and we spent some time going there just to say, hey, what's it gonna look like?
Right.
Because we don't want the headache. But in reference to your 10:30, a lot of our older kids who would go participate in high school and middle school, it's one of our feathers in our cap is keeping these kids together and walking them into West Essex with friends outside their four walls. But with that being said, those kids also train with the high school, so a lot of them don't start playing until, we don't get them till the spring really. So those hours are a non-issue for us.
Would that be 7 days a week or 5?
I would love to say 7, but the parents would kill us. It probably would be 6, potentially for a 7th.
Monday through Saturday? Monday through Saturday?
I think so. A lot of our usage for that, like, we've got great relationships with the towns. We've got our space, but as I said before, as rec programs grow, our space gets smaller.
Are you okay?
We could see some Sundays for supplemental training in the rain. If a game's canceled, maybe a team goes inside, but I don't know that I would limit it to 6 days.
You feel better with 7?
I would, yeah.
We'd
7
like
if the-
to have Sunday,
if
if
the
you wanna make
parents
the
agree.
hours shorter on Sunday, that would be fine for sure.
I just think that, I personally think that if, 4:30 to 10:30, even during the afternoon, sometimes if it's a holiday and the coach wants to get some training in the summertime, if it's too hot, again, I was there at 2:30, 3 o'clock, and the front parking lot is empty. Even the back parking lot where we would like them to not park was pretty empty. So I don't see it as a bad fit, but we'll talk fit with the planner.
Okay.
Rich? Mr. Travato.
Chris, you had said that you will rent to other programs, or,
No. We're gonna keep it inside our membership for now, yeah.
so there'll be no other sports or no other,
It's not currently in our plan outside of our membership.
okay. And you said 16 to 18?
Say that again, I'm sorry?
16 to 18
That's
players.
the number of
Players.
children on a team.
Correct.
And that's what they're limited to.
Could we set a limit of 22?
I don't see why that would be an issue. We're not allowed to have a roster bigger, so,
Okay.
yeah.
Only if the intent is later down the road, if you do choose to rent out, we still want to limit that.
Other questions? Rich, you have more?
Mr. Chairman?
Yeah, Mr. Carmignola.
CJ, have you run anything like this before?
Yeah, I've been running West Essex for probably the last 8 years, involved in the soccer for 25 to 30. It's just an extension of our outdoor space.
Like, there's gonna be no games there, so it's fair to say you're working with these children one-on-one, your coaches?
Well, our ratio, we try to go 15 to
Well,
1,
yeah,
but yeah,
yeah.
there may be some supplemental if our trainers, we encourage them if they wanna do extra hours and work one-on-one with kids, fine. It's not big enough for games, frankly.
Is it fair to say then most likely, and correct me if I'm wrong, the parents mostly just drop their children off
It's encouraged, we like that.
and they go away.
They do,
come back and
yes.
pick 'em up. So
Yes.
really the traffic's just gonna be
Yeah, so inside
that
the
1 or 2
space,
time.
yeah, we purposely designed it with coach's room. We also have some parents who are physical therapists, who are nutritionists that are gonna be running coaching sessions with our kids in that respect, but we purposely designed the holding area, we would call it, the waiting area, smaller to encourage the drop-off. We'd rather it be that way. And I had spoken to the gentleman at Parisi, and he feels that his people don't stay either. We expect that to follow suit.
But in all fairness, and the reason why I asked you is, I was there a couple of weeks ago, I had to drop my granddaughter off at Parisi, and then I went next door to look at your unit, that just happened to get in the mail. And I'm looking, I'm saying, I think this is exactly what he's gonna do next door.
Yeah.
And what I noticed was, maybe 1 or 2 parents stayed to watch a little bit and then left. Coaches came in, they parked in the back, they came in through the back door, they did their running, whatever they had to do. The traffic going in and out was not bad at all in that area. In fact, there was a lot of empty parking spaces.
Yeah, he's been very helpful, actually, before we took the lease, he was very helpful in giving us guidance on what would be most conducive to moving people in and out, because that's our goal.
Thank you.
I'm sure, as we all know, the less parents around, probably the better for training.
The happier the kids are.
That's for sure.
No offense to any of the parents up there.
Mr. Baskinger.
Yes, I know you said there was, children kindergarten, and can you just clarify if it'd be kindergarten to like high school or?
So our kindergarten our first play, I'll call them playable, kids that are eligible to play are, they call them U9, so under 9, age of 9. Everything else, below that is just more of a clinic, like we're currently working with Essex Falls Recreation, and we're helping them. We just, got involved with Roseland Rec to help them outside, but those are gonna be primarily, kindergarten at our age our kindergarten programs are under U9, so kids that
Okay,
are
up
6,
till-
7, and 8.
So
Up
it's not
to-
men's soccer?
No,
or
we-
Men, that's what we're trying to get at, not men's one-on-one training or?
I don't think so, unless our trainers pick somebody. We really have never had that. A lot of our kids foster, feed off after the high school. We actually I'll put a plug for us. We just graduated one of our kids to the Olympic Development Program. So we're pretty proud of him, and that's just the testament of the work that we do for the kids. But I don't foresee that. We take teams as long as we can.
And I just had one question in regards to, do you know if this building's sprinklered?
It does.
And is there any type of netting to protect the sprinklers from getting hit with the ball or?
There is, I think they put no, there currently isn't.
What's gonna protect it from, let's say, a kid randomly
I'm
kicking a
sorry.
ball in the air?
I
and-
apologize. They did put the cages over the top. We
Okay,
had had them come in and do that.
okay, thank
We didn't need a pool, so we were
you. Yeah,
okay with that.
thank you.
Other questions for the applicant? One last one from me, CJ. The one thing, so you have 15 different teams. The one concern would be when one team is training and another team is going to be coming in to train after. Are you going to space that out a little bit so we can get the parents picking up the one crew, dropping off the other crew as a condition of approval? Not that we can really
Yes.
watch it, but a half hour in between sessions just to,
Probably would run on a 15-minute. We did think about that only because getting the teams in that time frame, and not wanting to overload.
right?
But, yeah, I don't see an issue with that at all. It happens in our turf fields all the time when
Yeah.
we practice at places where parking is tight, and we got a pretty good system going.
For the board's edification, how long does a practice usually last?
The younger kids are going for an hour. The older kids go for an hour and a half.
Other questions for the applicant? Seeing none. I'd like to open it up to the public for any questions anybody has of the applicant. Seeing none. Thank you, CJ.
Thank you.
Mr. McDonough?
With regard to this application, John, do you swear the testimony you're about to give shall be the truth?
Yes, I do.
Why don't you state your name and spell your last name for the record?
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is John McDonough. That's spelled MC, capital DONOUGH, and I'm the project planner.
Yeah, I know Mr. McDonough, I think the board does. I don't, do we need to qualify him? I don't think
He
so.
doesn't have to be qualified. He's accepted.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. So he's qualified as an expert in the field of planning. What did you do in order to prepare for today's hearing?
We conducted a standard planning analysis. We reviewed existing conditions. We were there, Mr. Chairman, today, about an hour before you were there. So I will have some photos to share to represent what we saw and sort of validate what you saw. We reviewed proposed conditions and how the two marry up. The zoning considerations, we are here for use relief in your LI, Light Industrial Zone District. And then, of course, the criteria that would apply for grant of that relief.
Now, do you have any exhibits you want to submit?
I do. With the chair's permission, I have about 6 photos that were taken today and then one aerial on the top of it. I have enough for all the board members.
Can we
Why don't-
mark it just as A1?
As a group. Yeah, six photos?
It's a packet of 6 photos all stapled together.
Got it. That'll be A1. And these were taken today?
Taken today around 1.
Thank you.
Mr. McDonough, would you please summarize the application from a planning perspective?
Okay, so in summary, you'll see the very first page of the exhibit. It's a single tax lot. It's a developed tax lot. Block 1907, lot number 1. It's about 3 acres in size. And it's developed with this white roof building that you see in the middle of the photograph. We've outlined the subject property in yellow. It's about 45,000 square feet, as you've heard, divisible into approximately 9 units, each at 5,000 square feet. Pretty much completely occupied, except the subject, unit number 3, is vacant. Again, this building is predominantly, if not entirely, occupied now by predominantly warehouse uses, but there is also another recreational use immediately next door in the Parisi facility. Surrounding land uses, you can see we're industrial on 3 sides here. And then on that 4th side to the east, we've got residential, but it is clearly buffered residential with a nice band of vegetation between the subject site and those homes.
The applicant testified. What's the plan the applicant has?
So it's to utilize or occupy that unit number 3. We've given you a picture in here of what unit 3 looks like. It's about 5,000 square feet. Again, for this indoor soccer facility, no real physical site changes to the site as it presently exists. Basically, what you see in these photographs is what you'll get.
And what are the zoning considerations for this application?
So we're here in the LI, Light Industrial Zone District. There's a variety of uses that could go here. It is an actively zoned zone. Permitted uses could be warehousing, you've got packaging, offices, business schools, business services, all could go in this space.
And the relief needed?
So the main relief, again, as always, Mr. Zabo has given the board the good roadmap here in terms of the relief that the applicant needs and the things that you should think about in terms of the criteria. The main relief is D1 use relief. You heard about the nice things that this application will do as an indoor soccer training facility. It's not expressly permitted in your LI zone, so it does require use relief. There is some subsidiary C relief related to the parking location in the front yard. That's an existing condition, it's not changing. And also impervious coverage at 81%, where 55% is the maximum allowed. Again, that's an existing condition that's not changing with the application.
What are the justifications for the D1 relief?
So we'll take you through the positives and the negatives. Obviously, with the positives here, we got to bring it back to the land use law. We see multiple purposes of zoning that are advanced here, including purpose A, the promotion of the general welfare, because the use will provide enhanced soccer training for players in and around your community, the Fairfield area, with the ultimate goal of getting these players to play together in the local high school. Additionally, this is going to promote the broader planning goal for healthy and livable communities. This is for active play or active recreation in a relatively small space, which we know soccer is a game that relies on footwork, that is best trained and learned in a small physical space, and that's why this is a good fit here as well. We also see the advancement of Purpose G, the planning goal to promote a variety of uses in appropriate locations. Again, given the physical space being relatively small, and is going to complement the other uses that are on the site. As you've heard, there are 102 parking spaces on the site right now. The actual demand with all of the uses, including this use, would be 75 parking spaces. So there's actually surplus parking, and I think you can see it in photo 3 or 4 that we've given you, which is what the chair had mentioned before. Actually, it's right there on page number 5 to show how parking is plentiful on the site during a normal business day. You've got actually a nice shady parking lot over there and plentiful parking for accommodating this particular use. Purpose M, the efficient use of land, because the application is for adaptive reuse or occupancy of existing developed space. This is not wholesale new construction or build up from the ground up. And then finally, purpose I, the promotion of a desirable visual environment. This is a nice, neat, clean, well-planned facility. It's a familiar part of the local landscape. It is not changing. The application is going to keep what's there and work with what's there. So that goes towards all the positives. We also see the site as being particularly suitable for the use because it's developed and easily accommodates the use with simple retrofit. And most importantly, we're in a non-residential area, which your master plan talks about keeping non-residential uses away from intruding into residential zones.
Any public impact you'd like to mention?
Well, based on all the testimony, you've got CJ with the operational testimony here. I believe the board can certainly find that relief can be granted without substantial detriment to the area or to the zone or putting anyone in the public in harm's way. It's an enclosed building. It's going to contain the use, so we won't have excessive noise, excessive lights or activity. I thought it was a good comment about the consideration about the fire sprinklers and the protection there. The traffic, the parking generation is not significant given the small scale of the space. The fact that people are not going to necessarily stay here. This is a pickup and drop-off type of use, which is encouraged by our operator, and confining and encouraging the parking to the front, not to the back where there could be potential conflict with those commercial vehicles.
Any zone plan impact?
So again, the degree of departure in terms of the occupancy of the space here is not significant given the distinct characteristics of this particular piece of property. I believe this is not tantamount to a rezone that would open up the floodgates, I'll say, for the entire facility or the entire district to be converted over to these recreational uses. And I do find that goals and objectives of the 2022 Master Plan Reexamination Report would be advanced here, including goal number 1, to focus non-residential development in existing non-residential areas. Goal number 2, to ensure that any new development minimizes impacts to surrounding uses and the community at large. Goal number 4, which is sort of the converse of goal number 1, to limit the intrusion of non-residential uses into residential zones. And I think the board can also see a nexus with recommendation number 2 under your additional recommendations in the master plan, which is to limit truck traffic on Passaic Avenue. Obviously, this is not a truck generation type of land use.
The C variances are pre-existing, but can you briefly review the justification for the C relief?
Sure, I think the board can tie this back to the C1 hardship, which is relief that relates to the land, the structures that are lawfully existing thereon. The applicant's not worsening anything that's there now. I think the board could also find under C2, under the balancing, where the benefits of the application as a whole would outweigh any detriments associated with those 2 or 3 C variances that are being requested.
And as a result of all your testimony, what conclusion have you reached?
I think this application is consistent with good planning principles for orderly community growth and development. Most importantly, it meets the statutory criteria for the relief the applicant is seeking under the D1 and the subsidiary C, and in that regard, approval is warranted here.
And as to the engineering review letter, are we able to comply?
I did not see anything in here that the applicant has issue with, likewise for the planning report.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, I have no further questions of this witness, and I have no further witnesses.
Okay, questions from the board for the planner? Yeah,
No site work, right? It's just all
No
inside.
site work, no restriping, taking the site as is.
Okay.
the, there's, you spoke about no negative impact. Well, I agree. You heard earlier, I was talking about putting a sign on the back door that said employees only for the coaches and the employees and trying to herd the parents to drop the children off in the front rather than the back. Are you in agreement with that
I am,
idea of the
yes.
sign in the back?
Yes, it's a navigation aid, and directing public to the front is a good thing.
And
In this neighborhood.
the idea that children will be navigating in a light industrial building or park, tell me what your feelings are about the front parking area and the sidewalking, and whether or not you feel comfortable that it's a safe venue for this in that type of use building.
This is an area that does have good pedestrian connectivity. There is that sidewalk which shows up in the photographs that we've provided. So there is certainly safe navigation from the parking area to the front door.
And your, so you felt it was carrying out the purpose of the zoning, that it does fit. This use used to be allowed in this zone, and it was fairly recently, over a period of so many years, that it changed where it wasn't in this use, allowed in this use, which I think was done by the town because there were some huge soccer facilities that would be able to play games in it, mixing it with commercial parking with people going into stores and things. So I think they tried to limit it. So my guess is that these smaller facilities, you know, maybe should have gotten excluded somehow by square footage, but this doesn't impact the way a full facility would that has games played in it.
Right, I don't think this would erode the integrity of what the governing body was trying to achieve. I think this is different and warrants different treatment.
So,
Because of the extremely small scale of the facility, yes.
and as far as Medici's concerned, you feel, I've heard nothing but benefits to the community, so it far outweighs the negatives?
That's correct, yes. I would reconcile the omission of the use here, again, by the very distinct attributes of the space and the small scale of the use. I think I heard 16 to 18 at max. So that's another, I think, condition that the board can certainly hook to the application.
Now, I don't know if this is for you or for the owner, the operator, but there's nothing on the reports regarding signage, so they're just gonna follow along with whatever the proper ordinance signs are for the
Say,
building?
Mr. Chair, as you work your way to what is the entryway coming in off of Passaic, there is a monument sign there with multi-panels.
Right, I saw
I
that.
would surmise that the applicant would take one of the panels if they're available.
And if it's within ordinance, something on the back of the building and something on the front door, that would say where they were. So all signage will
We're
stay
certainly
within
not
the
looking
ordinance.
for any
Right.
variance for signage. Whatever
Okay.
we put up will be compliant, and again, probably just a sign in the front on a monument.
Okay. Other questions for the planner?
Mr. Chairman?
Yeah, Mr.
I
Carmichael.
believe the sign's already existing for your client there on that. Am I correct, CJ, right? That's already there, so that's just gonna stay there.
The sign's up. The landlord was ambitious.
I missed it, not very good.
Mr. Trevada.
Mr. McDonough, can you go over you had stated goals and you numbered them. Can you just review them again for me?
Sorry if I went too fast, but goal number one is to focus non-residential development in existing non-residential zones. This is an interior space in a non-residential zone, so I think there's a good nexus there. Goal number two is to ensure that any new development minimizes impacts to surrounding uses and the community at large. So I think there's good compatibility with what the applicant is proposing here and the other uses in this relatively light, this light industrial zone district and the warehousing that's going on there. And then finally, goal number four is to limit intrusion of non-residential uses in residential zones. This is not an expansion into those residential zones. It doesn't require any increase in the size of the building or the size of the parking. I'll call it the development footprint is staying intact and not encroaching any closer to those homes that you see in the rear. And then the interesting recommendation number two that I saw in the master plan, which seemed to focus on limiting truck traffic on Passaic Avenue. And I'm guessing you got some big projects that were dumping a lot of trucks on there. So this clearly is in line with that goal.
Thank you.
I have a question for Mr. Szabo. John, when it comes to we read your report, appreciate it. When it comes to targeting the master plan and whether or not it fits in the zone and whether we're comfortable, can you give us a little bit on what you feel about that?
Okay. I was gonna chime in, and add some observations. I take no exception to Mr. McDonough's testimony. It's consistent with the statutory criteria that's required. A couple of things. First of all, one of the things that the re-exam talked about is that the township has to start thinking about and looking at the permitted uses in the various zones because it's evolving. Uses are evolving. We've got uses that we never considered, years ago. Doggy daycare, doggy hospitality suites. We've dealt with a couple of those. Tattoo parlors, that's evolved into of a use that's deemed more acceptable. We're talking about taking a look at the kinds of changes. And what I've observed, not just here, I'm surprised this is in a pickleball court because I am inundated with these types of applications, most particularly for pickleball. But with my knees, I doubt I'll ever be playing that game, but or soccer for that matter. But the truth is that I'm seeing more and more applications with recreational uses evolving into empty warehouse industrial space because some of these smaller spaces are just not attracting the kinds of tenancies that make them profitable, or they're just vacant, they're not being used. So you're seeing a lot of these conversions and leases going to recreational uses. I find that, in these types of conditions, and especially industrial zones, that these buildings lend themselves very well to recreational type activity. They're open spaces, so they're easily redesigned interiorly for whatever recreational use you want to do. They lend themselves, the buildings in particular. So I kind of concur with the applicant's position that the master plan is looking for evolution of uses eventually. And secondly, the impact of this, it remains an industrial building with a recreational tenant. It could always go back to whatever that use was before. It's that kind of use. I didn't see the impact associated with this that would be damaging to the master plan or zone plan for that matter.
Thank you, John. All right, no other questions of the planner? Seeing none, and open to the public. For questions for the planner, I see none. I'll bring it back to the counselor. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I have no further witnesses. And again, John did an outstanding job. Just a brief summation, if that's okay. Mr. Chairman, members, it's an existing 45,000 square foot warehouse building. The applicant is leasing 5,000 square feet for soccer training for West Essex youth. The property is in a light industrial zone. We need use relief as indoor soccer is not expressly permitted in the zone. John explained the various reasons, the master plan. Also, we need bulk relief for two pre-existing violations. We are not expanding, we're putting a modest use in there, 16 to 18 children at one time. Somebody suggested a max of 22. My client certainly has no objection to that. The site is completely developed and we're making no changes to the structure at all. The only thing we're doing is putting turf in. Again, predominantly a non-residential area. Again, we're in an enclosed building. Going to be no noise emanating. The fire chief was okay. The police chief was okay. You've heard from Mr. Szabo, the engineering report, my planner commented on all of those things. And certainly, there's no harm to the intent and purpose of the zone plan when we're dealing with an industrial zone. Actually, it's very positive. There's more than sufficient parking. And as to the C variance, the benefits clearly outweigh the detriment because there is no detriment. We're bringing a youth-oriented athletic training, which I think is a major benefit to West Essex. And I thank the board for all their comments and attention to this case.
Thank you, Bob. All right, time to open it up to the public for anyone who has any comments or opinions regarding this application. I'm seeing none. We'll bring it back to the board for board members to discuss opinion or make a motion.
think this is a relatively straightforward application, Chairman. I'd like to make an application. Subject to the conditions that we discussed, I would move to approve application number 2024-3 West Essex FC. I believe the application is for the D variance and then any other pre-existing variances. So that would be the motion to approve all that.
Right, do I have a second? Mr. Travato is a second, just for edification purposes. Mr. Mariano is not here tonight. Mr. Iania will be a voting member. With that said, Steve, can I have a roll call?
Mr. Honorata,
Yes.
Mr. Metallo,
Yes.
Mr. Baskinger,
Yes.
Mr. Travato,
Yes.
Mr. Carmagnola,
Yes.
Mr. Iania,
Yes.
Chairman Lepari.
Yes. Counselor, thank you. CJ, good luck.
Thank you. Appreciate your time and attention. Pleasure to be here.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's why
All right, we'll go right into our next application.
Mr. Chairman?
Yeah.
I'm gonna need to recuse myself.
Yeah, Mr. Carmagnola is recusing himself. Mr. Iani is a voting member, and Mr. Ivorone will be a voting member on this application also.
Gentlemen, have a good night.
All right.
Good night.
You too, Ann. Old business, application 2023-5, Daniel Sirica, 81 Passaic Ave, block 18.01, lot 1.02. Second part of the application meeting for major site plan, C variance and D variance. Counselor, how are you tonight?
Good evening, Chairman, members of the board. John Kiaya on behalf of Danny Sirica here on 81 Passaic Avenue, Fairfield. I have one witness tonight, and that's our planner. You haven't had any planning testimony as of yet. This is our second night before the board.
John, you want to give us a little bit of background, a little bit of catch-up on the application itself, and we'll move right into your witness.
Okay, yes, thank you. This building is almost nearly constructed on 81 Passaic Avenue in Fairfield. The property is currently has garage doors in its rear, so trucks can go. The vehicles that are a part of my client's business can go in through those doors. It's a brand-new building. They put in a showroom on the second floor. They're proposing to change the use of that showroom to a bedroom, one apartment, one room, basically one bedroom apartment. He would like to have his father live there in that apartment, but right now, the use in that zone does not permit for residential. There'd be no construction needed or proposed. The furniture basically has to be changed. That's essentially what we're here to get from all of you folks, is the approval to have the residential use on the second floor. And it's not a complete second floor, it's only a partial second floor, because the greater part of the building is the garage space, which has, it's only one floor, goes from floor to ceiling, and it's got a high ceiling. So it's only the front of the structure that has the office down below, and up above was supposed to be a showroom. There is an elevator in the building as well.
Okay, and you had a prior meeting, you had the applicant testify, you had your architect testify, and you had your engineer testify, and everything's okay and up to that point, and we're just doing the planner.
That's correct, Chairman.
Okay.
Is there a bathroom up there, shower?
Yes. Yeah. Yes. Your ball, Counselor.
Mr. Marucci, would you please state your name and your education and qualifications for
Let
the
me
board?
swear him in, please. First, with regard to this application, do you swear the testimony you're about to give shall be the truth?
I do.
Could you state your name and spell your last name, please?
Anthony Marucci, Marucci.
And you did submit a planning report to the board, which I think we all have.
Yes,
Yeah.
I did. I hope all the members have it. It's
Yeah.
dated August 1st, 2024.
Thank you. Mr. Marucci has appeared in front of us before.
Oh, he doesn't need to be qualified,
No,
absolutely. He's
Licensed
accepted.
land use planner.
Yeah,
Last month he testified.
That's
here
right.
As a planner.
Thank you.
Mr. Marucci, are you familiar with the site at 81 Passaic Avenue?
I am, yes.
And you prepared this report as you just stated, is that right?
That is correct. I did prepare the report that's before the board this evening.
Would you like to let the board know your findings?
Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Chair and members of the board, first of all, the first thing I performed was a site inspection of the property, and you see in my report, I have some photographs of the building under construction. It's almost completed, actually, but it's under construction. This property was approved by the planning board originally, and the original approval was for a showroom on the second floor. Now, it's only the front portion of the building that has the office and the showroom. The rest of the building is a two-story open space. So the second floor was approved for a showroom, and the applicant decided to make that into a one-bedroom apartment. In preparation of my report, I referenced the site plan that was prepared by Mr. Mastronardi, the planning report that was prepared by Mr. Zabo, the engineering report that was prepared by Mr. Berry. I also reviewed the 2022 reexamination report and the land use element, and I reviewed the various chapters of the zoning ordinance with respect to the light industrial zone, the commercial overlay zone, and the airport safety zone. Basically, the property is very unique. It's a triangular shape. It has the airport to the right, to the north and to the west, and then an industrial warehouse complex to the south. With respect to my report, I don't want to read my entire report, but I just want to describe the fact that in the master plan, there are certain aspects of the reexamination report that I refer to. The fact that there's a growing concern over increasing traffic along the Passaic Avenue corridor. As a result of the township's housing element and fair share plan, sections of the Passaic Avenue corridor have been rezoned to encourage mixed use and multifamily development. It also recommends that the zoning ordinance should be amended to limit or otherwise prohibit large-scale warehousing operations where currently permitted along the Passaic Avenue corridor to promote greater compatibility between land uses that are evolving as a result of recent zone changes and reducing truck traffic along the roadway. It is recommended that consideration be given to studying the conversion of office space buildings to alternative uses and adjusting parking standards for such uses, as there is a lesser need for office building occupancy today. The showroom would require more traffic because you'd have customers basically going in and out during the day. The one-bedroom apartment, if at all, you're gonna have someone that's gonna be living there, maybe going to work in the morning, depends on the occupant, and just coming home at night. So with respect to the conversion of the property to this one-bedroom apartment, I think it meets one of those goals of your master plan to reduce the traffic on Passaic Avenue. Obviously, we need a D variance, and that's where I got into the positive criteria. And again, in the master plan, it recognizes the need for mixed use and multifamily. In some of the photographs you'll see in my report that's already occurring. There's multifamily across the street, basically diagonally across from the subject property. And the recommendation in the master plan is to maybe convert other properties along Passaic Avenue to residential. Based on that, I believe that some of the purposes of the municipal land use law are promoted. Purpose A, which is the most common, to promote public health, safety, morals, and general welfare. Purpose B, to secure from fire, flood, panic, and other natural man-made disasters. Purpose C, to provide an adequate light, air, and open space. Purpose I, to promote a desirable visual environment. And purpose I, to encourage senior citizen housing construction. This is a brand-new building. In my opinion, this modern construction is very aesthetically pleasing. The residential component would provide more security for the premises, because someone would be occupying that basically 24/7. And in my opinion, the residential component is compatible with the residential use, both existing and proposed, in conformance with that reexamination report. I also got into the C variances that came from Mr. Berry's report. One is the driveway, and we need a C variance because our driveway is wider than what's permitted. 30 feet is permitted, and ours is at approximately 35. It's just 5 feet wider. In my opinion, the wider driveway enhances traffic movement, turning movements in and out of the site. The other C variance is the pavement that was constructed by the owner is the concrete pavers. Now, concrete pavers, in my opinion, are just as durable as asphalt pavement. It's something that's being used in residential and commercial properties throughout. I don't see any negative impact on that. Basically, with respect to the negative criteria, this application proposes no substantial detriment to the public good, and it poses no substantial impairment of the zone plan. In my opinion, one of the things is that this one unit apartment will be inconspicuous. No one would even know it's there, so it doesn't have any impact on the public, in my opinion, or any detriment to the zone plan. That's really all I have.
Do you think that this, if they should grant the relief, that it can be granted without any significant impact to the community?
In my opinion, like I said, it's inconspicuous. It has no impact on the community at all.
And you did say there was more residential development currently on Passaic Avenue.
Yes, and proposed.
Could you repeat that, please? What did you
That's
say?
a different zone, though, I think.
I asked him if there's, if he could give his opinion on, currently, is there residential uses on Passaic Avenue? And his answer was that there is across the street, and there is proposed more residential
But
coming.
are they in an L1 zone?
No.
No, correct?
That's a question.
I'm sorry?
He asked, is it in a L1 zone, any of the other residential? Is there an
I think
example?
I think it's a different zone. I think.
Well, they should know that, so let's hear the answer.
Well, I think they were L1 zones that were changed over to the, I believe it's the MD.
What are they currently? Do you know?
I'm sorry?
Do you know what they currently are zoned as? What's
Yes,
their zone designation?
Like I said, it's the MDO across the way, Mixed Development Overlay Zone.
Real quick, some of the things you said I have a question about. You were talking about, you were comparing the residential unit as better for traffic than the showroom. Does that mean that they're not going to be using a showroom at all anymore there?
To the best of my knowledge, all they have is an office on the first floor. There is no showroom, but I'll defer to the applicant on that.
Okay, and you were talking about how there's promotion for residential in a law, and you're talking about how this would, no, two different questions. First of all, you were talking about how there are promoting the residential that has been promoted in the area, wherever it is, across the street, even if it's in a different zone, that was due to the affordable housing. The overlays were due to the affordable housing criteria that the state laid on every town in New Jersey, correct?
Well, some of it was for the affordable housing, but you have regular rentals also. It's not
Yeah.
all affordable housing.
No, well, yeah, obviously, every job that falls in a multi-overlay for the affordable housing plan, you might get 60 units, and 20% of them are affordable, and the rest are market, and whether they sell them or they rent them,
That is correct.
okay. All right, so the job across the street to the right that you can look at from the front door, that was part of the overlay zone for the affordable housing plan.
Correct.
So, do you feel as though the town is promoting residential in that area, or do you feel as though the town, like all these other towns, were forced into finding overlay zones to appease the gods of New Jersey when it comes to this affordable housing plan?
I think it's a combination because one is for the affordable housing, but also the change in the uses. The light industrial isn't as important anymore. In other words, there isn't that much usage for the light industrial zone. Also, part of the re-examination report was the reuse of office buildings. Same thing is happening with office buildings. So I think when you put that all into combination, residential uses are more appropriate. And I see this happening in a lot of different places.
You know, one of the things that I'm sure we'll get into with the planner and other people, but, you know, undue hardship. I mean, it was basically testified at planning and here as an owner-operator building. The owner and operator were gonna operate a showroom, windows and doors, and whatever else he was gonna do there. So it's not on a large scale, like a lot of light industrial and warehousing that needs to be converted into new uses because even though the warehousing, like, you know, it's become popular again with all the Amazon and, you know, warehousing in Fairfield is filling up. So but this is minor, but don't you feel as though, would you consider this an undue hardship if he was denied because it's such an unrentable piece? I mean, would you go that far? Because I don't see it as I see that residential might generate a little more interest than what he has approved now. I agree with that, but not to the level of undue hardship, would you?
It's not an undue hardship. I just think it's a less intense use than a showroom would be or any other type of commercial use in terms of customer use, traffic. The residential use is much less intense, in my opinion.
The square footage of the showroom, the amount of people that may drive in and out during the day, you know, is it I mean, I'm trying to fit this in a smaller scale. You're trying to show how much help it's gonna give Passaic Avenue and all that stuff. I'm trying to picture large-scale properties where that type of thing might be true, and I'm trying to fit it in mentally to a much smaller scale, where it's a very small showroom with a couple of 4 parking spots out front and a residential. I don't see the gap as nearly as effective on Passaic Avenue.
It is a smaller scale, but again, the showroom, you would still get more activity during the day.
Sure.
Customers could come in at any time, whether it's by appointment or not. I'm just saying that the residential use would be less intense.
Yeah, Mr. Trevino.
What is the square footage of the proposed showroom?
The showroom that's existing now, or
It was proposed as
oh,
a,
right, okay.
know if I have that.
We have plans here.
About 1,000 square feet. 1,020 square feet, so it would be the same as the apartment.
Follow-up question, are you okay with
No,
that?
okay.
I have a
Other
question.
questions? Yeah, Jared.
How common is it to have an apartment in a L1 zone?
It's not. That's why we need the D1 variance.
Right.
Being upfront, it is, that's why we're here.
I
for the
appreciate your
D1
honesty, I really
variance.
do.
But again, in this, I look at this case, every case is on its own merits.
I agree.
And that's what I'm looking at.
Okay.
And like I said, to me, it's inconspicuous. You wouldn't even know the apartment is there.
I don't, I think there are larger issues besides it not being inconspicuous, isn't true? They designate zones for many reasons, right? And in an L1 zone, you're gonna have some type of noise or traffic or some type of use that's not necessarily compatible with residential living. Would you agree with me generally?
But in this case, the owner wants to have a family member live there, so it's
I understand that
basically part of
also.
the operation. So that's where it kind of makes sense.
Well, yes, Mr. Travano, Mr. Metallo.
That point, that last point you made, but I'm sure, and it's been mentioned in previous discussions, that a variance such as this lives on in perpetuity with the
Right.
property.
Right.
So if the family member doesn't care to live there anymore or goes elsewhere, then we have a situation where the residential could be leased to another individual, and it could be a single parent with a child. And we have a situation where a child is living on what I think is an industrial site, because when I pass this building numerous times, there's construction vehicles. There's a sign on the property that says general contractor. There's contracting equipment, and that is not conducive to me to having a residential and that kind of operation in one place. And it's not permitted, obviously.
Mr. Chairman?
Wait, Brian, let him answer.
Sorry. Sorry. Go ahead.
Now, you could answer Mr. Metallo's question.
Well, my response was gonna be, it could be another family member, or it could be an employee, because again, the uses could be related that way, where it could be an employee living there. But again, I look at this, again, if we were building a dozen units, I wouldn't even be here, sitting here explaining it. It's one unit, and I really think it's less intense than any other use that can go there, including a showroom. And it's ADA accessible because it does have the elevator to go upstairs, and it's limited.
But wouldn't this board, if it was inclined to go along with this application, be setting a precedent that other people would be coming before us and say, well, this guy's in the L1 zone and he's living there, so I should be able to have an apartment in my building too?
But as I said before, every application is taken on its own merits, so I don't see it as a precedent.
I can address that.
Okay.
The idea of precedent is important here.
Okay. Other questions before, I'm going to ask Mr. Zabo to ask his questions of the planner, but Richard, do you have one?
Yes, I do.
No, I'll go back to you. Oh, wait, I'm sorry, Brian, you were next, I'm sorry.
This was it's similar to what Rich had said, Metallo. Mr. Marucci, when this was originally approved, wasn't it approved, wouldn't be the showroom and the general contracting, let's say warehouse, be accessory to each other? Versus now you would take one portion of it away, and now you would have residential and commercial? Wouldn't this be a whole different type of use versus accessory?
Well, again, that's why we're before this board, because of the residential use. If the applicant wasn't proposing a residential use, he'd have the showroom there. That's what the planning board
Right.
approved, yes.
Well, doesn't accessory use, isn't that more conducive to each other versus residential and commercial?
The applicant, I'll defer to the applicant. The applicant wants the residential use here. Apparently does not need the showroom for his purposes. And my job or my charge is to try to convince the board that there are residential uses along Passaic Avenue because of the change or the overlay zones. And this is just one unit on Passaic Avenue.
Can you then make a comparison to another unit on Passaic Ave that has commercial or industrial with residential mixed?
Not in this area. I haven't gone that far, but not in this area, no.
All right, thank you.
Mr. Travato?
Just a follow-up question on that.
Yeah.
Would it not be accessory in a sense that it's his father who's familiar with the business and provides security for the company? Is that not accessory? Is it just as much as a showroom could be an accessory to?
John, I don't think that, one of the criteria of accessory is normal and customary. I don't think, that's why they're here, I don't think it's common, as your witness said, to have an apartment in an L1 zone with this kind of a use. So I don't think we're even into accessory.
Just such a unique issue where you have an owner's father who works in the company.
Yeah, but if this
considered.
board approves an apartment upstairs, it's just not for his father. It's for anybody, because it's the use that we would be approving. It would be an apartment. And if the father moved out, your client could put anyone in there who could handle a one-bedroom apartment. That's I think was mentioned before by Mr. I'm sorry, where are we? I think Mr. Metallo mentioned that, or was alluding to that we're not just limiting it to his father. It's
Yeah, that's what I want to ask. I'd like to ask my client if he'll agree to that condition, that there be no children, ever.
well.
So.
How do we enforce? How does the board enforce? How does the zoning officer enforce that?
Mr. Zavo, in my years here, I've heard you cannot condition any kind of residential to a particular tenant or family. It would run to anybody within, and what is the answer to the idea of trying to
If
limit
you were to limit it to, for example, the applicant's parent, it would be impossible to enforce. And it takes away the whole issue of what is it that you're approving. It's not who's occupying, it's the fact that it's a residence. That's the key issue for the board. It doesn't matter who lives there. So when you approve this and you attempt to condition it to a relative, for example, or no children, it's not enforceable, because it's unreasonable to expect the zoning officer to go to the mailbox every day to make sure that that condition is being satisfied. The premise in planning, we lay uses out according to a master plan. We adopt zoning ordinances to implement the plan. Uses have to be self-regulating. You know, the way the zoning scheme and master plan works is you have an expectation. Retail is permitted here. Industrial is permitted here. You know, when you start getting into hybrids of, well, you know, we'll piece off a little bit, and you chip away at some of that outside the scope of the master plan, you're getting into an area that's difficult to enforce. And legally, because what's going to happen is, I've gone through this. I've done zoning enforcement in all the communities I've worked for in the 40 years I've been out there. You make a condition, it's a parent, for example. The parent moves out for whatever reason, and it's rented. Zoning officer goes out there, knocks on the door, you're not a relative, I'm issuing a summons. You go to court. Judge is going to say, well, what's the difference if we have an adult living there that's related or unrelated? You have someone living there. What you need to think about is the combination of uses at this location in the context of the land use plan, the master plan re-exam and its goals and what it recommended, and the zoning scheme that was since adopted to implement that. And that's really the consideration. And maybe, you know, some of my questioning of the applicant's plan will elucidate on some of these issues, but I'll defer to the board when you're done.
Okay, well, yeah, we'll get to you.
I'm around.
Rich, you had a question?
Yes, as far as your use of an example, stating that across the street there is residential. That block and lot is exclusive to residential and residential only, is that correct?
Yes, it is.
That's, would be a consideration of why you would do that, is because it's exclusive to that block and lot for residential, correct?
Yes, that one is strictly residential, but you do have the mixed use, the MDO, mixed development overlay. I'm sorry? That one there is a. Okay.
Also, I had one other question for you. In just prior testimony that we just heard tonight from that planner, he had stated a list of goals, and I asked him to repeat that because I clearly heard him say that as a goal, it is very high criteria to not have residential in a non-residential zone. Do you agree or disagree with that?
Well, that was for that application. It was because that was a completely industrial building, and it was proposing an industrial, not a residential use. Again, this is a very unusual or unique property, and we're only talking about a one-bedroom unit. That, what are you gonna have at the most, one person or two people in there? And it's, in my opinion, the least intense use that you could have on that site, in lieu of a showroom, where you'd have customers and traffic in and out.
Do any other board members have any questions at this time? Or if not, I'd like to go to John to hear more of Mr. Zabo's report and maybe any questions he may have.
I would like to just have a discourse with the planner.
Sure, sure.
Put that on. Mr. Marucci, we both could agree that it's important that the guidance that the board has to follow is the statutory criteria, right?
Yes.
Okay, which is why I lay it out in my reports. I know you know that, but I always put in all my reports to remind the public, and for the record, this is the statutory responsibility of the board. Okay, this is, we also agree, Mr. Marucci, that the burden is on the applicant, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And the reason why the statutory is so important is because if you don't adhere to the statutory criteria, it gets into the area of what we asked before, precedent. And the question I'm always asked when we have these applications is, are we not setting a precedent? Mr. Marucci is correct. Every application stands on its own merits. Approvals, though, have to be sustainable through the statutory criteria. You've got to be convinced. It's your responsibility to say it fits the criteria that the courts have handed down to us and what the law says. If you deviate from that, and I'll give you an example, you are setting an exam. You are setting a precedent. I'll give you an example, real life case. I won't name the town. An applicant comes before the board looking for a floor area ratio variance. We all know it's a D4 or D5, one of those. It's a use variance. Again, there are statutory criteria that have to be applied. The basis for the approval that they were looking for was they were pregnant and were having a baby. You grant a FAR use variance on that basis, that is going to set precedent because it's not tied to any statutory criteria. The fact that you're increasing your family size is not a basis. The basis has to be found in the master plan, in the context of land use, the negative criteria. We're going to get into all that. Another example, I need a 6-foot fence in my front yard where 4 is permitted for security. We all want security. Another example of where if you deviate from the statutory criteria, that's a precedent. So it's very important that we establish the criteria. So I'm going to go through your report. We're going to talk about how you feel the statute is satisfied by the application in your report. Now, you mentioned that, and you testified that there's residential right across the street. You're aware that that's the multifamily development overlay zone, correct? and that permits residential development.
Yes.
Okay. And that zone was recognized and established in accordance with the 2022 re-exam and land use element amendments.
Yes.
Okay. So during the 2022 process of reviewing master plans, zoning, all these criteria that we have to look at for a re-examination report pursuant to the land use law, there was an opportunity, as you said, to create mixed-use zones and residential along Passaic Avenue. But certain sites were selected for that and identified in the report and in the land use element, correct?
Yes, they were.
By block and lot.
Yes.
Was this property included for any consideration of residential?
No, and again, that's why we're here, though. That's,
Okay, that's absolutely correct. So we had a master plan process. It identified properties for mixed use and residential development, either as an overlay or by right. The properties you identify across the street are identified for for housing, but nothing else in that corridor until you get up to the Kingsbridge Road where you have the RZO overlay. Everything else is commercial, and everything else is commercial overlay or industrial along Passaic Ave, correct?
yes.
Okay. So now let's talk about the development across the street, the multifamily. That's designed and built in accordance with zoning, master plan, and looks like a residential development, right? It's
Yes.
multifamily. You're talking about a single unit above a contractor's office, I presume, or a contractor's building. How does that compare to the residential development across the street that's designed to be a residence? You have a commercial building that's used for a contractor's yard, and you have an apartment upstairs. How is that compatible or consistent with? If you can elaborate on that for the board.
The argument is that the applicant's family member is to live there. I believe that he would be, he would allow a condition to be placed on the property for that. Again, I look at this as a least intensive use than a commercial use on that second floor. Look where we are. We have the airport around us and
We're gonna
commercial,
get to
so.
that. Yeah, but is it standard planning practice to put residences in industrial areas and right next to, perhaps within 80 feet of a hangar of an airport? I mean, is it good planning to put residential in conditions like this? In your opinion?
Again, that's why we're here for the D variance.
But I
Is it
asked you if it's
is it
good, I asked you
plan-
if it was good planning. I didn't.
Is it good planning?
That was the question.
The second floor is there already. It's not like we're proposing this building. The building is there. It's under construction, and this is what the applicant would meet his needs more than the showroom. And is it good planning? That's why we're here for the D variance.
The fact that the space exists, is that a basis to permit anything that goes up there? You're alluding to the fact that it's there. Well, we're planners. We have to consider everything in context. But you said it's there and it's innocuous. Is innocuous a criteria under the law?
In your master plan, in the reexamination report, it did call for mixed uses.
Mhm.
And this would be a mixed use. A very innocuous mixed use. And again, your Passaic Avenue corridor is changing. It is changing, there's no question about that. The warehousing is limited. That's why you have the overlay zones. This is a very small property. It's unique. It's basically all by itself. It's surrounded by the airport. And we're talking about one unit.
When you say that the corridor's changing, is it as a result of the master plan? And the zoning
Yes.
that, okay. So the changes that you're seeing on Passaic Avenue are occurring as a part of a plan, which this site was not included in, correct?
Well, this site was just approved just a few years ago, so it was a vacant site at the time, so it wasn't included, right?
And it was a permitted use that was proposed, correct?
Yes.
But, but this doesn't bear any relationship to what's going on in the corridor because the corridor has its areas that are being designated for residential development or mixed use. So I'm struggling with how is this compatible with what's going on in the corridor. The other thing that you mentioned is that, you know, this is a less intense use and will generate less traffic, which is a master plan goal. But the master plan talks about traffic in the context of truck traffic, right? Because the concern at the time was we don't want, you know, single sort end stage distribution centers like Amazon coming in here and blowing up the traffic on Passaic Avenue. So the theory was, well, we're gonna discourage large scale uses that would generate truck traffic. You kind of equate that with this use. How do you reconcile that?
Well, I look at the traffic in general. The Passaic Avenue it's not just the truck traffic, it's very heavily traveled, both in truck traffic and vehicular traffic. And that's why I use the argument that the showroom would require more traffic, more trips in and out of the site than the residential one-bedroom apartment.
But when you zone property for permitted uses, that's a consideration in that zoning, correct?
Yes.
I mean, you buy the traffic with the use. One thing that struck me in your report, and I didn't hear it in your testimony, one of the most important, I just have two more questions.
Sure, take your time.
And again, I'm just trying to establish a record to give a basis, one way or another, for the board, to clarify your testimony. I'm just,
Understood.
we're having a conversation. One of the statutory requirements of the Medici case, the famous Medici case, is we have to reconcile the use with the master plan, but we also have to show that the site is particularly suited for the use. It doesn't have to be the only site for the use. You don't have to demonstrate that, but how, can you elaborate for the board how you feel the use is particularly suited when it was originally designed for commercial development that was permitted?
I believe it's particularly suited because the building will not change. It is ADA accessible, it has an elevator, and there's just no change to the actual design of the building or to the site plan, outdoor site plan. That's why I say that whether this was a showroom or an apartment, it would be inconspicuous to the sense that you wouldn't see a difference.
Okay. And the last thing that Medici requires is a reconciliation of the use and the master plan, given its omission by the governing body. And, you know, this board gives annual reports every year as required under the law to the governing body. And they point out things. And we have a master plan that's designated areas for the type of development that's sought for multifamily and mixed use. This property wasn't included and not even considered, and I can tell you because by virtue of its proximity to the airport, and also more importantly because on that side of Passaic Avenue you have all commercial uses. The residential tends to be on the opposite side. But how do you prove how do you reconcile? Can you elaborate on reconciling the master plan's omission of this use here against the 2022 plan that designated particular properties for that use for residential development? And how do you reconcile the negative criteria in terms of, because you talk about, you wouldn't even know it was there. I don't necessarily disagree with that. It's a reasonable conclusion. The point is, though, you have to also demonstrate no negative impact on the zone plan and the zoning ordinance. Now, the zone plan has areas that it's designated for residential development, mixed use, multifamily, doesn't include this. So how do you reconcile that with the master plan and also the negative criteria that says you can't have a substantial detriment.
This is the only property on the westerly side of Passaic Avenue that has that two-story level to it. Most of the properties, the warehouses are all single-story. If you had an office building, I could see an office building that would be multi-story that could have offices on the ground floor and residential above, so I can see the difference there. Again, because this property is unique all by itself, it doesn't really affect the zone plan or the current zone plan.
I mean, that's a fair opinion on your part. I mean, that's something that the board will have to weigh and consider. That's fair. I understand. I'm just pointing out that based on the statutory criteria and what we do as planners when we lay out uses, we pay very close attention to zoning and what's around these particular uses, and we form our recommendations and regulations accordingly. You know, and on that side of Passaic Ave, you got either you have a choice, industrial development or commercial, because it's a CO. It's an overlay, so you can develop either or.
Yes.
I mean, using the upstairs, I mean, the applicant is not precluded from putting something up there that would conform to zoning, would they?
Well, he wanted to do that. He wanted to have the showroom there, and apparently that doesn't work for him, so this is the alternative.
Okay. Let me just go through some of my notes. All right. I have no further questions, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate the discourse, and you know, the board will have to weigh, you know, whether this rises up to the level that satisfies the statute or not, and there's sufficient reasons to grant or not. It's up to you guys.
Okay. Are there other further questions for the planner off of the conversation between Mr. Mariucci and Mr. Zabo?
Just my last comment is
Sure.
that I think the board needs to look at the uniqueness of this property, the triangular shape, the fact that it's got the brook to the north and the airport. It's just a unique property. That's why when the town looks at the master plan, they didn't even look at this property because of it's just a very small property that just what else can you do with it? That's the bottom line. What else could you do with it?
All right. Since you brought that up, I got a question on that. The unique shapeness of look at it's a rough piece of property with the brook and the size and the triangular effect of it all. That was taken into consideration at planning as a positive reason to approve the building to be built. And I agree that it should have been. What else could you do there? You couldn't pretty much do anything else but what the applicant built there and what the planning board approved there. But don't you think that the odd shape of the lot now becomes negative criteria for a residential upstairs? Not for the father, because the father knows construction. He's safe, he's been around it his whole life. But with the idea that if he leaves and they rent to anybody else, doesn't the uniqueness of the property now, with the blind way that's a two-way driveway around the back where there's parking in a garage, where a truck might pull, where a dump truck might be in under the garage, and material out in the back, and mixers and generators and skid steers and all the other things, and try to get people out, to a mother and a daughter or somebody, or even other older people out that aren't in construction, out the door and navigate through a tight, odd-shaped, unique property? Doesn't that fly against it now? It was a positive, the uniqueness, when you got the approval, but does it become a detriment to this?
The entrance to the apartment is from the front of the building.
Mm-hmm.
If you look at the photographs and you're looking at the front, it's the door to the left.
Right.
And obviously it has the elevator also on the interior, and the parking for the apartment would be in the front, so that the two uses would be completely independent, in my opinion.
You think that, you really think the residential use and the general contracting construction use. In that smaller building, no matter where the front door is, where the driveway is, where the driveway apron is directly independent?
Independent in the sense that the apartment parking would be in the front. There are two spaces in the front. There's a handicap space and a regular space. And that would be independent of any kind of truck movement in the driveway going to the back.
Going to the back, okay, as long as no child or anybody walks back there, but then walks around when, there's safety issues. That is the reason why when he asked for this residential unit at planning said no. And he accepted what the building is now.
Understood. And again, if the second floor is used as a showroom, you would have more safety incidents or problems, in my opinion, because you could have a customer parking in the back and walking to the front to get to the showroom. Because again, the two uses are separate in that sense. You have the door to the apartment is in the front, and that's completely separate from the actual operation in the rear of the property.
I don't disagree with that analogy. I just think that a person going to a showroom on that property is aware that they're not walking into their own home or navigating their own home. They're walking to a business where the chances on windows and doors of kids or super old people being in there isn't so much. And you know, they're prepared to go to that type of building and know what the hazards and the dangers are. Like if you're going to a strip mall and going to the ShopRite, you know the hazards of navigating a parking lot. You're expecting that. So I think the people using the showroom would expect that more than someone who is one or two or three or four people up there with children or older people. So.
But Chairman, again, it's a one-bedroom apartment, so it's not two or three or four people.
Oh, sure it can be. Don't tell you, by today's standards, the way they're squeezing people in these days, you think the landlord, him or any other landlord, is going to care when they rent to a woman and a child, and she winds up with a boyfriend and another child, and they decide to squeeze them all into a one-bedroom? That's going to happen. That happens regularly. You know, their houses are filling up now with people in our town, and there's 3 bedrooms and there's 9 or 12 people sleeping in it. So, yeah, I do think that it's not just limited to 2 people.
I understand. I explained to the board, I serve as a zoning officer myself. I do enforcement myself, and I've done it for many years, so I understand that. But again, I'm just trying to.
Just for clarity, because as you're talking about parking, and I think unless there was some testimony, I'm not sure, maybe I missed it, but you're dedicating areas for the residents to park and the showroom customers. I'm not sure.
Well, there is no show.
Or office, or.
If it's a residence, there is no showroom. The residence is taking the place of the showroom.
But there's ground floor space.
But the ground floor is an office. That's the contractor's
Okay.
office.
And the residents, you're saying, are going to be dedicated to park in the front? Is that, like, I didn't hear that testimony, but in the front will be reserved?
The chairman asked that, and that's my opinion. That's why he said there's a separation in the sense that the residential parking would be in the front and not have to walk down the driveway to the back at all.
And what's the required parking for a one-bedroom apartment, RSIS?
Based on RSI is 1.8 spaces.
1.8. And how many spaces are in the front?
I believe there are 2.
And one is a handicap?
One is handicapped.
So that would be only allowed if the resident is handicapped, correct?
But again, it's 2 parking spaces. That's what the.
But still, the handicap space would be reserved for somebody that's handicapped.
There are 2. There's the handicap space and the regular.
And one non-handicapped.
Correct.
Okay, just wanted to make sure that was clear for everyone.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question.
Yeah, Mr. Iannia.
Mr. Marucci, the other space on the first floor that you just mentioned, you said it was going to be office space. correct?
Yes,
Is that the office for Mr. Sarika's business?
that's my understanding, yes.
Okay.
Any further questions for the planner?
Mr. Chairman, just a general question. I know this is a there's other parts to this applicant, like the pavers and the curb cut. Is there anything that the planner could put towards that, or, you know, are pavers considered compatible or a replacement for asphalt, and is there any concern? I think he did address the curb cut, being a safer turning.
I did, yes.
Yeah, I don't know if we need to get that on the record as to, you know, for the pavers.
I believe I testified that, in my opinion, the pavers are just as durable as the asphalt pavement. As a matter of fact, it's something that's being used more common today in
Okay.
driveways and.
I missed it then, thank you.
And if I may, I believe that it decreases the runoff because some of the runoff is absorbed in the brick pavers versus the asphalt pavement.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, Mr. Travano?
In the original application, I'm not sure if you know, this was considered as full occupancy of the owner for all three areas of the building.
I have to defer to the applicant. I believe it was, but I'll defer to the applicant.
I just had a question about why is there 3 meters? What is the purpose of 3 meters on the property?
I would have to defer to the applicant.
Any questions for the applicant? John can bring him up. He's been previously sworn, so.
Come on up. Well, no, let him, are we finishing with?
Well,
I asked a question and he can't answer
it was,
it, so.
that we could defer to later. We could finish with that, or you do it, however you want to do it, John.
Okay, just state your name for the record.
Danny Sarika, resident of Fairfield. How you doing, guys? I know each one of you's up there. I'm hearing this testimony, and I'm glad to answer. When you're a builder, you do everything in the extra mile. You do the extra meter. Instead of doing blacktop, you do the extra paver. You make it look a commercial building that looks residential. I got Ivory growing up, making it look like a Tuscany taste that you guys didn't see. The building is on the left side of the ditch. There's no trucks. So that whole piece of property with the flagpole, there's gonna be a picnic table there. There's gonna be a lot of stuff to the left. Bringing up that you can't change the zone, I don't know, I'm not an attorney, I'm a builder, been doing this my whole life. We could go, I wanna work with you guys, I know everybody here, 55 and over. Eliminate kids. But to say that I can't get an accessory apartment, I'm in town. I love this town. I know Tony, I know everybody here. So me not getting an accessory apartment because it's not across the street, it's the guy across the street walks to my building. I sold him a house. His name is Lou. I'm under contract with John with the contract. So to say there's no tenants, there's a guy that has no license across the street. Why do I know? Because I'm building the building. The guy comes over, hey, how you doing, Dan? Let's get a cup of coffee. We go in for a cup of coffee. So as an in-town person looking for an accessory apartment, I don't see it as hard as this is taking place. I'm a little upset is because everybody's got a little something to say. Meanwhile, that piece of property brought no tax income to there was nobody saw what I saw. So, Tony, you're correct. I saw a little piece of property. I put my building in. I sold my building in Lyndhurst that looks identical to this one and put it where I live now. So when I want to walk home and I want to do a 1.5 mile exercise, I walk down and I walk to my house, and it's 1.5 miles away. So I feel like I'm a lucky guy having my construction business in town. I keep my trucks out of my house, which that's the first reason I ever bought a construction building, is because I was getting in trouble. I was bringing my stuff home. The neighbor, hey, get your dump truck out of here. Get your dump truck. So that made me build this building in Lyndhurst. Now I sold it in Lyndhurst because I don't live in Lyndhurst. I move it here, find a beautiful piece of property. I develop it. I give it a little taste of Italian because I try to bring in the stucco. I do what I got to do. I get a complaint. Instead of me doing blacktop, I do pavers. I think I'm going to handle it. I said last time, I said, Tony, please, let me allow to, the last meeting I was here, let's be fair. I ran for election. I wasn't allowed to put nothing in my basement. So Tony said, that's ridiculous. I have him on record. You're allowed to put stuff in your basement, storage. So let's clear this building. 3 meters is just because when you're a builder, you do a little extra. Just, that's the only answer, and it's a true answer. You want to do extra this. Oh, just in case we want to do something with that garage, we know what it costs us. So that's just the idea is just to, when you're in the business. So I'm trying to resolve a lot of this back and forth. I agree. Nobody's gonna know if it's an apartment or showroom. It's so discreet and so by itself. And on the left side, not that I'm saying I'll go 55 and older just to please the board. On the left side, they got a playground. They got a piece of property that can't be developed, and they can play their brains out. On the left, you just walk out to the left, and there it is. So I don't know. I'm a little disappointed that we're getting this back and forth. I think I got a great planner. I think the building looks beautiful. I mean, it's my building. I think it looks very, very nice. Brian's in the business, so.
And in regard, the building's beautiful. That's
Yeah, I
not
mean-
the issue here. And the only reason I brought up the pavers is because it's something that's addressed here to get a variance.
I'm gonna say
I'm
thank
not-
you.
I'm not
Thank
saying
you.
anything against the pavers.
No. That paver thing was been a thing over my head. Please, let's clear up the pavers for Steve. Let's clear up, I could use the basement. Let's try to get the accessory apartment above a construction company, which is fine if you want to make it 55 and over. Let's work together. Like I said, I live in town. I love my town. There's a lot of things that I love about the town. I'm trying to do good for the town.
Okay,
Rich,
so-
I felt like I had to get up here and to say something, is because I had to get my feeling out here to let you understand it.
You win the lottery, you decide to move to another state, another country.
I'm never gonna leave
That
you, Rich. I'm
building,
gonna stay
if
here.
this board were to approve then that apartment.
Stays with the,
be
absolutely stays with the thing, but for 55 and over, it's a beautiful, beautiful apartment. I mean, come and see. If it's an office, it's nice. If it's an apartment, if it's nice. If it's a showroom, it's nice. I built it. So, and I think the most accessible thing right now is for the security of that whole area would be great.
And when it comes to that, security of what whole area? Your father is not a security guard. What is that? What does security have to do
Security,
with that
get the
area?
phone. That's easy. Fire. 911. There's a fire across the street.
So should I stand on Hollywood and should I wait for fires and accidents and call the police?
No, but this is just, you're living there. You do it automatic. If you see your neighbor's house, you're gonna
So
call.
Passaic Avenue all of a sudden needs a warden.
I think every place needs a warden, the way it looks like.
Oh, I don't know about that, but, all right.
This was originally approved for a showroom, correct?
This was originally approved. I bought this property. I came in. I wanted it to approve that night, thinking that I'm working with the town. I'm always gonna be here. Not really knowing what you're gonna do in the future. The future is now. My father sold his house. He didn't want to stay at a house that he was in. So you adapt and you overcome. This is the way we are in New Jersey. We adapt and overcome. We say, hey, Dad, got a beautiful building. Instead of making it a showroom, we'll make it an office. We'll make it your apartment. So We adapt, I put an elevator in there, not knowing that I'm gonna have this big hurdle.
How do you know you weren't gonna have the big hurdle? You got an approval for a showroom in a light industrial. You asked the planning board, for residential. They said no. They
No,
said
no,
it
that's
was-
not true.
It is, no, it is true. They said
don't
no.
recall that.
Okay, well, I do, because I read the minutes. They said they wouldn't want you to pull a dump truck into a 14-foot garage door opening upstairs from residential. So they said no to the residential. You took the showroom and the office, and you got your approval, and it was built. That's what happened.
Tony, I'm gonna be serious. I don't recall us doing that. That building, I don't recall it being an apartment.
Wait, you don't recall it being what?
I don't recall you saying that I was taking something away from the building. I don't recall. I
What do you
mean,
mean
it's been a
taking
long
something?
time ago.
I'm not saying taking something away.
Let
I'm
me
saying.
clarify, if I may.
Yeah, go ahead.
The planning board couldn't give a use variance. It was that simple. So it was either he was gonna take the application out and come here, or just take what he could get.
Okay, so you took what you could get. So you took what you could get, and then he said he built it for an apartment.
No. Then I said, a tragedy happened in my family.
Yeah.
Let's make it clear. Tragedy happened in my family.
I know,
and
and I addressed that last time.
Okay.
Don't throw that back in my face, because it was emotional too. I told you how much we hurt for that whole situation. It was a bad situation.
Tony, I'm not trying to tempt it. If this is
All
for
right.
me talking bad, I'm gonna go sit back down. I'm not trying to come at you. I'm just trying
because
to tell you.
because it was an
Whatever
emotional
happened
thing, we know
emotional to
that.
you, it happened more
I
emotional
know
to me
that, but
400
but
times.
we all
But I don't want that
understand
emotion,
that.
and I said it to you last time, emotion, I don't want you to take emotion. It's a little building with an accessory apartment. If there was accessory apartments available in Fairfield right now, it would be permitted. I think Steve could let you understand what I'm saying. If there was accessory apartments available, and I would get 70,000, I would be able to put a person in there from the, whatever, that low income. But there's no accessory apartments available, which is permitted in any structure in Fairfield.
Except for the zone.
No, in this zone too. An accessory apartment, if they're available, you could put them anywhere in the Township of Fairfield. An accessory apartment. I'm not asking for an accessory apartment because I want to put my dad there.
I don't
I mean,
completely understand
Steve, you
that.
understand what I'm saying, right, Steve? If accessory apartments are permitted in any part of,
What the applicant is referring to, there is an accessory apartment program through the affordable housing regulation.
which would be permitted there,
That-
we wouldn't be here.
Right. If you meet those requirements and,
I'm just
not ready
trying to
to
explain
go
that
through
I
'em,
know,
but yeah, that's what
I
you're
know the
referring to.
code, I understand what's taking place. I'm not looking for sympathy of the death of what happened to me. I'm just trying to explain that the building is by itself. I built it with love. I'm gonna own the building forever. A little accessory apartment is great. Right now, my dad will be in there, 55 and over. Nobody's gonna get hit. There is a rec area. The whole left area is, you can't do anything with it, which they could have a picnic. And that's why I wanted to come up here. And the night of that board, I was trying to say, I don't remember. I just took what I got because I had to do a closing on the property. I was getting a double squeeze when I was buying that property.
Right, you got the approval for what the use was. You said it was gonna be a showroom with an office attached for it, and upstairs, offices in the showroom upstairs.
I also said, the way I'm seeing it now, that I was gonna say I was gonna put nothing in the basement. That night
All
was a
right,
blur.
well, the basement thing is silly, because you should be able to store
mean,
Hilti tools
I
or
agree,
whatever you
I
want.
agree, but on my deed on my resolution, it says nothing can go in the basement.
Okay, but right, I know that, and that's the planning board thing. What we're saying here is, the idea of the back and forth between the planners is law. There's no emotion in it, there's no individual in it. This is what they do for a living. And it's incumbent upon your planner to take the standards and convince us that these standards fit. That's what we're trying to do here right now. But you got a building that you got approved for a showroom and a window commercial company or door company. Now you're just basically saying, and your attorney said, well, we got what we could get at planning. I don't want a showroom anymore, so there's not gonna be any commercial anymore. So now it's gonna be a residential upstairs and my general contracting business downstairs. So at least you're being honest by saying, I am changing everything about the use of this building, which you are, right?
I'm not all I'm changing is I'm making an accessory apartment. The
You're
building-
making,
all you have to
you're
do is
making a
change the
you're
furniture.
making a you're putting in a residential apartment upstairs. You're taking the showroom away, which takes the commercial away from it, and you're making it a construction company yard.
Not a
with
yard.
office.
No, I'm just making it a construction. I'm making downstairs an office
Right?
and upstairs an accessory apartment to the building.
And what are you
That's
doing,
it.
and what, in the back with all the things we talked about last time?
Parking, it's gonna be for parking.
For-
You
for-
see
for-
the building, you see that I live here, right? I'm only gonna do good for the town.
Stop that. It doesn't matter because people live here all the time. Sometimes they do good, sometimes they don't do good. We're talking about this particular subject. We've seen your construction materials out there. So it's a construction yard and your construction company and the residential. So it's not a commercial showroom business anymore. So you're here asking for you're asking for a complete switch. And Mr. Mariucci, correct me if I'm wrong here. From what there was with planning, you're coming here for a variance to get a use variance, but you're changing the whole complexion of the building. You're changing it to an apartment upstairs, you're taking the showroom completely away, and you're asking for the construction company downstairs where the dump trucks and mixers and material is allowed, which also flies against the things that the planning board said that he wasn't allowed to do. So do you understand the massive change in what this building is and what you guys are asking for?
I understand, but with respect to the equipment or the vehicles, he has two 18-foot high doors that were approved from the planning board. So any of those trucks or vehicles can be stored inside. As far as any outdoor storage, I would say, I think there's outdoor storage only because it's under construction now.
No, I'm not gonna buy that from anybody. The thing's been done for 2 years. The only thing that was left were the little things to do with driveway aprons and pavers and stuff. The stuff is there for a reason. Stuff, he doesn't have anywhere else for
Tony,
his dump
Tony, I
truck.
have no CO. I'm not allowed to get a CO.
Yeah,
I'm not allowed to get a CO.
yeah,
and
I know that.
Because of the pavers and
I
because
know-
of
I know
the,
the
me
reason.
putting,
So
being
where
asked
would
to
your
do the driveway.
mixer and
So
your dump
Steve said,
truck, where would everything go once
I
you
have
get
a-
in there?
I have a huge garage. Number one, hopefully, all my stuff is out. So doing what it's supposed to be doing.
Nah,
But when it gotta come in, I have a big warehouse and I have a humongous shed. I have two beautiful structures that the building is gonna be absolutely stunning. And I forgot to tell you, on the right side, I put all little chestnut trees from Italy that are all being grown. They're about this height. I put them in this big.
Well, that's
now they're
good.
This big.
That's good.
So,
Whether, if
so
you
what's
don't get the
happening is
approval-
I can't get a CO from
if-
Steve.
If you don't get the approval tonight, the town is gonna be happy to have your flagpoles, your chestnut trees, your beautiful building.
Pavers.
We are,
Wait a minute,
the planning board will have to deal with the pavers. It won't be us if we deny.
So wait a minute. So we're talking about a denial, which is
If.
very upsetting. But
If
okay.
it's- if it
But my
denies.
pavers, we've been waiting to bring up these pavers for me to get a CO. I don't have a CO on the building.
I
So
know
right
that.
now, that building is not finished. It's incomplete.
Right.
I passed all my inspections and I wrote an email to Steve. Hey, Steve, I had to get a letter from the state of New Jersey to say it was okay.
Right.
I don't know how I got that letter. I think me annoying, and I'm being serious. I must have made about 3,000, I got this letter, this amazing letter. Then I had to get another letter from the county because of the curb cut. I went there 250 times, and I got the letter from the county. So I said, Steve, here's the two pieces of paper that was like hitting the lottery, and I handed them to Steve. Now, Steve sends me another email back. Sure, can't do anything until they say something about the pavers. 3 things. And to me, I look at it, Brian, please help me, please. I'm looking for help.
Wish I
think pavers are 250 times nicer than blacktop. I mean, when I see pavers, if somebody does pavers, you do your driveway with blacktop. You do it because it's less money. You don't do pavers because it's triple. I did
The
triple.
board would like I could completely explain this issue. He's, paraphrase, I guess, what has occurred before. It's simple, and I don't think this is actually at the crux of what this board is considering. Planning board approved a site plan. The plan that was presented to the board and approved indicated asphalt for the parking. He did pavers. They may be great. They may be durable. We have testimony that it's durable. That sounds great. That's not what the planning board approved. When I sign off on a CO, we need to check that the site plan is what they approved. And unfortunately, by the definition, it's a variance. So it's a new variance. So I think it was efficient while he's up here presenting the apartment to try to also get that variance granted. If not, has to go back for these changes back to the planning board. Same thing, which may be a very minor item about the driveway entrance. So that's what had occurred. I can't sign off. You don't take a site plan approval from the planning board and just consider it, a rough approximate.
Right.
It's the expectation you're gonna build it as shown. These differences, they may be minor, they might be not, they need to go on a new site plan. So that's the only issue. It's not any judgment on pavers. It's a variance. Yeah.
I think they'll be asking for relief on those items. If we approve the apartment, then they're also asking for C variances to approve those changes to site plan from planning.
We don't have to connect them all together. You could approve the pavers and the
No,
curb
we can't. No,
I don't want to intrude on the,
yeah, go ahead.
right or wrong, I don't want to intrude. I don't want this board, I don't think it's appropriate to intrude on what the planning board did. I wasn't there, but if they said asphalt and the curb cut, right or wrong, what do we have to do with that? I mean, we're here because of the apartment.
We're here because,
And I know Steve was trying to economize and say, why don't we put it all in one basket?
Well, I think it's under the fact that that they have site plan here. That they have site plan here
Yes.
because of the use variance. If we were to grant the use variance, we then could grant site plan approval, which would have changes like the pavers and the widths and the entrances.
Right.
Yes,
Right.
That's why I viewed it, it would be a brand new site plan
Right,
approval.
if we,
Superseding
so if we
the
approve it,
previous one.
that could possibly flow all the way.
Yes.
If we deny it, then denying the use means that all that other stuff goes back to planning.
Yes.
We can't and wouldn't intrude on the planning board on that. So this application wouldn't have jurisdiction. So it's an all or nothing. Either we're going to approve the D, which would approve the site or the plan, or if we don't approve the D, then he can't look for relief from us on those items.
Go back to the planning board. So, yeah.
So that's where we are.
Chairman, I did address those C variances in my report
Yeah.
and in my testimony.
Yes, you did. Yeah. I mean, like we were saying, the pavers, they're beautiful. The storage of the garage, I mean, the basement, you don't want to store materials, but if you have Hilti guns and you have Milwaukee drills and things, yeah, that's the safest place to put those. You should be able to. Every person in their own home could put a drill downstairs in their own basement, so why shouldn't he? I don't see the C variances as that big a deal. They're not to me. What we're here for is the D, and whether or not it meets the special reasons and the Medici to afford us to say yes, and for daring the safety issues of going back and forth on the safety of the thing. So we're back to the D as the main cog here.
Yep.
Okay. We got that out of the way. Mr. Travato had a question for Danny. Danny answered it, and he basically said that the 3 meters and some of the other things that were done is what a builder does when he's building his own unit to improve or be able to have a better ability of flex on the property. That was his answer to that. We still haven't finished with Mr. Mariucci unless anybody else, because I'd like to close that unless anyone else has any more questions for him.
I have none.
Seeing none, I'd like to bring it to the public for anyone that might have questions for the planner. Seeing none, Mr. Mariucci, thank you for your testimony. It's always great, and your, coming in here and getting this report in was helpful. Thank you. All right, Counselor, ball's in your court.
My client put up their condition of a 55 and above, which would change the planning report slightly. If I'm not mistaken, that would be another benefit to under the master plan to encourage senior housing.
Which actually was stated in my report, yes.
And stated in your report. So we have yet another criteria for why this board can grant the use variance. There were also other criteria that I wanted to ask him as a redirect, because what came up was Mr. McDonough's testimony from the prior applicant, and it was one of the criteria he used, and you could use any grouping of them, but he did use one that didn't particularly flatter our application, but he used two others that I think do flatter our application. I would like to ask Mr. Marucci if he can tell me if G, a variety of uses in geographic locations, would be a benefit applicable here.
Again, this Passaic Avenue corridor does have a variety of uses, so I think this is a good location for this type of use.
And item M, a productive reuse or repurposing of a space, of an existing space.
Well, that's exactly what we're doing. We're changing it from the showroom, so it's a reuse.
So you see, there are many reasons why this board certainly has the authority to go forward and grant the use variance. With the 55 and above, it certainly addresses the concerns you had about children being on the property. And knowing the intent, and it of course, his father would be intimately appropriate to be there in the place of business, because Danny spends more of his time at work than he does anywhere else. So, you know, this is like a second home already, just when they're working. For the father to go upstairs to sleep is something you should be taking note of. And we know it's not permanent, because nobody lives forever. So the 55 and above should be permanent, and it's a valuable consideration for the appropriate use of this property in your town.
Do you feel as though is there any 55 and overs that have children or young teenagers in them?
That's not allowed. It's not allowed.
Is it allowed or not allowed?
I don't know about that, but I know of people who have.
The whole advantage.
It depends on how it's written up. A lot of the 55 and older allow children of a certain age, up to a certain age.
Right.
Some don't. It depends
Okay.
on the development.
Oh, all right, okay.
So for example, when they're proposing to develop Greenbrook, one of the considerations is that will impact West Essex High School.
Mhm.
To the extent that they're offering 100% 55 and above in North Cornwall, that's the argument they're making. There'll never be a child going to the schools from here. So I do believe there's a way, and our condition would be that way. It could be worded, where it's 55 and above only, with no families.
Okay. So that's part of your condition of approval. Okay.
And last thing, I also take issue, and I'll do more research on this, Chairman, but I know this board has the authority to grant bulk variances. An applicant doesn't have to come here with just a use variance. You can come here for bulk variances, and that's part of our application. I think this board can very plausibly approve the C variances that we have here.
Okay, that's for Lou and John to talk to you about.
Without a use variance, I mean, we can deal with site plan approvals, which this is part of, the pavers and the curb cut, in the context of a use variance approval. If we say no to the apartment, I don't know if we retain jurisdiction to then take what the planning board has said and change it. I mean, if I was a member of the planning board, I'd be a little upset. But that's my gut. Short of approving the D, I don't think we can pick two site plan issues that the planning board determined and change them.
Government efficiency, this is one government. We're two boards of the same municipality. We've paid extraordinary sums of money, not just in professionals, but in application fees for a use variance we may not get, and for these C variances. I can't see how you cannot regard it as something we should vote on. And I think we should table this meeting so we can get a legal determination.
I know.
Well,
I don't think we have, short of, to say no to the use and yes to the variances seems to me to be kind of incongruous. We're here for the use mainly, for the apartment. And if we say no to that, what jurisdiction do we have to grant? I mean, if you came to us with just the dimensional variances, no problem. We can consider those, the pavers, the width. But short of that, I don't think we have the jurisdiction to get into those issues.
I haven't briefed it, and I would never disagree with council's opinion, other than to say, I think it's appropriate to give me an opportunity to find some authority for either
No,
of us.
we're not going back for, we're not going back for another round. No, you could, we're gonna go with our attorney's advice. If this was a bifurcated application, if they came before us and asked to bifurcate and go C's first, then D's, or D first, then
Because if
C's.
it goes D first, they would have to get the use variance with the majority of 5 votes, five yes votes.
Right.
And if they get the use, then we can consider the site plan issues. And that does not require a majority vote. That requires majority of the quorum. So, but this is not bifurcated.
Right, it's not bifurcated, and in practice, I
and
don't,
if we
I
say
hate
no to the
bifurcating
use,
anyway, because one always has to do with the other.
That's a good analogy. If we, on bifurcated applications, John, if a board says no to the use, what's left? I mean, there's no.
There's no reason to bifurcate because the site plan is tied to the use, so the use is denied, the application fails. This is a combined application.
Well, now it is, yes. I think the issue is if we, and I don't think we
You
can.
have to do the D first.
Exactly.
When you bifurcate, usually what happens is you want to spare yourself this.
Right.
Most of the site plan applications, you want the application to be determined first based on use.
Mm-hmm.
It's very unusual to get a bifurcated application for site plan.
Right. But my point is, if this was a bifurcated application and the board said no to the use, I think we're done. Yeah.
How does that differ from the All-Pro application last month, in which we asked for a use variance for vacuums, which you could have said no to, and yet we had sign approval? So I don't understand why
We,
bifurcating this.
no, I'm not saying we're bifurcating, but that was all in one application. We gave the vacuums and we gave the sign. I mean,
Had you not given the vacuums, you could have still given the sign. And that's what I'm asking you to do now. If you do not give the use, then I ask you to give the
use variance application. We proved the use, which was an expansion of a pre-existing, it was a D2, expansion of a pre-existing.
The board looked at that as a
right,
package.
but it wasn't a D1.
No.
Okay,
But it was a D2, it was a site plan tied to an expansion of a non-conforming
Yeah.
use.
all right, and we approved the caboodle.
Yes.
You approved the use,
Right.
which was the expansion, which included the vacuums.
Okay, look, we're gonna get a vote tonight. If you find any law that flies against what Rago has, or that, then,
Send it to me before we adopt
That makes
whatever
sense.
resolution we come to.
all right, because, we're at the point now where we've heard all the testimony. And now, we're at least gonna go over we're at least gonna vote on the use tonight. I
Well,
need
we
to
need to
know.
vote on every,
On
the
the
application.
application.
Yeah. And if in the meantime, John comes up with something that's convincing, then we can revisit it.
Right, how do you wanna close, John?
Well, we humbly request a motion to approve the use variance to allow Danny's father to reside upstairs of their office. And for all of the reasons stated in the report and those that came to light tonight, there are numerous criteria that would allow that to be granted. As for safety concerns that were also brought to the board, the applicant agrees that 55 and above with no children be a condition of approval. And because it would be 55 and above with no children, it should address the safety concerns. It would mean that he couldn't rent to the open market when his father no longer lived there anymore. It would have to be 55 and above, which also suits Fairfield's obligation to provide suitable suitable senior housing in Fairfield. And as for the C variances, we've covered that the The pavers themselves, as an alternative to asphalt, have some durability advantages as well as perhaps impervious coverage, seepage of rainwater. And that the wider opening off of Passaic Avenue, which was approved by the county, would allow for greater area for people to egress the property, which is a benefit. Thank you. I thank you very much for the time you guys gave on August night. To be here is commendable. Thank you, and thank you for your considerations.
Open it up to the public for anybody that has any comments regarding this application. Seeing none. All right, we'll bring it back to the board for discussion or a motion. What do you guys think?
I'll say something. You know, my original thoughts were, you know, he just wants to put his dad up there, and then I was like, yeah, I'd love to have him do that. But then originally when they had said that whatever we approve has to follow with it, and Danny gave testimony that he would rent it to somebody else, God forbid your dad had passed, that changes everything. And now we're back to another situation where, well, maybe we could limit it to 55 and older and no children. But if we approve that, then, like, how do we make sure that the site is safe? There's no, like, fences blocking anything off from one thing to another. And now we're back to square one, like, outside. Like, what's the protection or separation from one to the other? And then they also think, well, all right, if you have the one apartment, what's to say, oh, if the office isn't used, then, you know, hey, that would be better to have somebody else that's older live there too. I mean, it's a tough application. And my mind has changed a few times. So maybe somebody else could help here.
Well, I see it relatively simply. And I sympathize with you, Danny. And I appreciate what you do for the town, how you keep your buildings. But by the same token, this board is bound to make their decision on certain criteria and listen to our planner and take into consideration his recommendations after we hear the evidence that you put forward. And there's certain things that we have to judge our decision by. And part of that is statutory criteria. And you know, I would love to accommodate you and give you what you want. But by the same token, we have an obligation to follow the law. And I think you're falling a bit short on that front. And as I said, I sympathize with you and your dad. But when I look at, you know, what you've given the board to think about, I don't think you meet the criteria of having an apartment in a light industrial zone. And the reason I asked your planner, how common is that? And he very candidly said it's not that common. There's a reason it's not that common, because it's really not allowed. And I think for those reasons, I think you're falling short of the mark on the proofs to convince this board. That's my thinking.
Other comments from anyone that would like to comment? Well, then I might as well weigh in. This is one of the most difficult applications I've ever had to sit on, because there's a lot of quality in the family and what has gone on, and I understand it. I've seen it. When you take emotion out of it, you have to go to, my two things were safety and the criteria, not the other things. The other things didn't bother me. The pavers, none of that stuff bothered me. The safety thing, like Brian Baskinger said, gets alleviated a little bit with the idea of the 55 and over. Even though it was Mr. Szabo's, you know, comments about enforcement, whether or not it's gonna actually ever be enforced, whether you're gonna go to a mailbox and make sure that the people are 55 and over. You're gonna go to a mailbox and make sure that a 60-year-old grandmother isn't gonna bring their granddaughter over and to sleep over, and there's no way we could enforce that, and there's no way the landlord's gonna ever know about it. So my safety thing is still an issue, but it's remediated a little bit more with the 55 and over. So I have to go to the facts that I've been on this board since 2002, and I've been the chairman for over 10 years. And I have to go to criteria. D1 is hard. You need to cross through special reasons, and you need to cross through Medici. All right, the special reasons, and I've learned this, and I've listened to these planners going over it. Does it carry out the purpose of land use? It's not a purpose of land use to have it in an L1. It's just not. Denial, would it impose an undue hardship to the applicant, meaning it can't be reasonably developed? It's already been built, it's there. And like I spoke to Mr. Mariucci about before, it's not a completely undue hardship to rent it or to operate it with what it's been approved for. So I don't see the two A and B and special reasons is met. So I'm kind of leaning towards Jerry. If special reasons aren't met, why even go into Medici? But if you go into Medici, the intent and purposes, I didn't hear enough about the master plan to convince me. So the needle is right in the middle there, but I got to agree with Jerry. I don't think it didn't meet the standards that I've been taught you have to go to have a D1. But that's just me. Doesn't mean that should be everybody. Any other comments? If not, can I call for some kind of motion?
Let's not be bashful. Somebody's.
All right, well, look, then, we're not gonna sit here all night looking at each other. I'm gonna make an application, a motion to deny the application.
A yes vote is to deny, if it's seconded.
Well, yeah, before we discuss it, let's find out. Do we have a second?
Second.
Mr. Travato is a second. Go ahead, what were you saying, Lou?
No, if we're gonna vote to deny, a yes is to deny. Just so we know.
Okay. We have a motion, we have a second. Steve, roll call.
Mr. Honorata.
Yes.
Mr. McDowell.
I'm voting yes because I feel, as I said earlier, there shouldn't be a residence here, and more importantly, or just as importantly, I feel to allow it would be to negate what the planning board wanted, which was no residential. So, yes.
Mr. Baskinger.
No.
Mr. Travato.
Yes.
Mr. Iania.
Yes.
And I assume Mr. Ivarone is
Yeah,
voting.
vote for him without.
Yes. Mr. Ivarone.
Yes.
Chairman Lepari.
Yes.
That's denied. 6-1.
Why don't you excuse yourself? You should excuse yourself. I had words, I called you a piece of shit in front of you 200.
Come on, we're on the record.
It would be recused, not
Why don't you
excused.
get yourself off the board instead of opening your mouth?
John, why don't you handle this, please?
Yeah, Danny, come on, let's just, no, he should have
Don't
took
say a
himself off the board. He's a clown. Everybody else, I don't disrespect. You, I disrespect. Right in your face, I disrespect you. That is a That's a clown right there. Clown, right to your face, anytime, anywhere.
Don't
Clown.
say a word, Rich, don't say a word. That's on, hopefully that's still on YouTube.
Good night, everyone. Good night.
Mr. Mariucci, take care, sir.
Great job.
Okay, motion to pay the bills.
Motion.
All right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion to close.
Make a motion.
All right, everyone in favor, say aye.
Aye.
We're out of here. Margot, tell me when we're shut off. But just, yeah, I want to make sure.